It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. If you're new here, I'm glad to have you. This podcast was formed to collectively build a bank of stories from normal people sharing their nonlinear paths. Unfortunately, social media paints a narrow picture of what success looks like, so I'm doing my best to spread the news that changing course is common and you don't have to know what you want to do the rest of your life at 18. If you're a parent worried about your young adult and whether their path is leading them to success, you're in the right place. I'm a therapeutic consultant who works with young adults to connect them with resources that'll help them get back on a better path. So if you're curious, let's chat. You can schedule a free consultation through my website, which you can find the link for in the show notes. Today, my guest is Bix Firer. Bix grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And when you hear the interview, you will absolutely hear subtle undertones of that Midwestern kind of twang. He has worked as an outdoor educator with children up to college students in Wisconsin, Colorado, Idaho, and Alaska. Bix loves to be outside, running, hiking, biking, and gardening. He currently lives in Spring Green, Wisconsin with his wife, Emma, their son, Angus, and two very naughty dogs. Now, Bix and I briefly talk about our crossing paths in this interview, but I specifically want to name it. It was when I was working at Denver Public Schools and he was working for Big City Mountaineers. I have read his wife's book, which I'll include in the show notes because it's fascinating. And if you are an outdoor lover in any capacity, work or personally, it's definitely worth a read. And if you're into fun, short podcast, adventurous stories, I'll also link the two that I'm familiar with. There's probably more Dirtbag Diary interviews that the two of them submitted. Nonetheless, they're an adventurous couple, and I'm really grateful for Bix for being on the podcast. So let's not wait any longer. Here's Bix. All right, Bix, thanks for being on the podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Joanna.
So we met ages ago when we both lived and worked in Colorado, and I think you're now in Alaska. Is that still the story, or did you move somewhere else?
I moved somewhere else again. I'm back where I grew up in Wisconsin.
Okay, cool.
Got a job in Wisconsin right after having my first kiddo. So moved back close to home and live in the Driftless area of Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Okay. All right. Well, we're still in different places, but that's beautiful nonetheless. So let's actually use that as a perfect segue. It sounds like that's kind of the area in which you grew up. But if that's incorrect, tell the listeners, where did you grow up and what was the messaging that you were getting about what you're supposed to be doing after high school?
For sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on Lake Michigan. Grew up on the east side of it, which was a really vibrant area. It was near a university, tons of access to city things. And I ended up going to a public school, but one that was super high achieving for the area. And I think the singular focus for kids was to go to college and be prepared to do that immediately out of high school. However, I was lucky to have very creative parents. They were like artists, writers. And so feel like I got an exposure to a variety of other paths through their social network of people who chose more unconventional ways to get where they were getting.
So what my follow-up hearing that backstory is then what did you end up doing?
Sure. Yeah, it was a very circuitous path to get where I was going. In high school, I took a class during the summer, which was really amazing that it was offered, that exposed me to a lot of the stuff that I've sort of carried through my life. So we did a week-long canoe trip, backpacking trip, all guided by reading Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac, which is still my favorite book. And so leaving high school, I sort of had a sense that helping people build an environmental consciousness, environmental ethic was something I was interested in, but had no idea what to do. And I did jump right into college and failed miserably. I failed out of all of my classes and just had a very bad time. Ended up dropping out of college for about 3 years and traveled a bunch in relatively unconventional ways and did everything from working as a carpenter to a line cook, hitchhiking around, just exploring, worked on a farm for a little bit, explored a lot of different ways to live, which was really valuable. But something was missing too in not having a direction, even if it wasn't the one everyone was telling you to get. So ended up going back to college after taking that time off, and then did really awesome in college, and was really laser focused on what I was studying and made really great relationships with professors. But I think I wish I would have listened to my gut when I was 17 and left high school and knew that I didn't yet know enough about what I wanted out of life to dive into something where you had to be focused. Yeah.
But you had to have that experience probably in
Totally.
going to college and like having all of those, you know, the grades, the classes, the experience where you said, this is not for me, to be able to take that break. And even though it might have, like you said, been unconventional, kind of this like winding path of trying on all these different hats, it led you to what it was that ended up being laser focused in that return to college.
Absolutely. And I mean, I distinctly remember I was working on a roofing crew and was carrying shingles up and down a ladder for like 10 hours a day. And I had the realization then that I could keep doing that for the next 20 years. And I like felt old and my back hurt and everybody around me was just like smoking cigarettes and drinking beer all the time. Or I could take myself a little more seriously. Didn't mean necessarily going to college, but just like consider what I wanted. Not that there's anything wrong with that path, but I was seeing it really negatively. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the reflection that you're talking about is what's missing and so important for young adults nowadays. It's not even the experience, or sometimes it is. You got to try on the different experiences to be able to take a step back and identify, is this something that I want to do, rather than just keep doing it because it's either the direction or recommendation that I've been told. And so like you said, like identifying, what do I really want? What do I want to do?
For sure. Yeah, and I think having the space to do that and making the space for yourself to do that, where you have moments of challenge, moments where you reflect with other people, interact with different ways of life, gives you the space for reflection. Yeah.
All right, so let's still walk it backwards. Now you're back in school. You're really focused on what it is that you want to do. Where did you go next? What did you do?
For sure. So in college, because I ended up becoming close to a bunch of professors and being really successful, had some really cool experiences. I got invited to work in Eastern Europe with a professor for a full summer. So spent time in Romania and actually ended up going back twice more, I think, from that experience. And then was encouraged to apply for and go to graduate school. And that was another time where in my gut, I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for this, but everyone's telling me to do this. So went to graduate school straight out of college, and sort of assumed I was going to be an academic because people were telling me that's what I was good at. And took my master's, which I was successful at, but pretty unhappy. I was living in Chicago. Discovered I wasn't really a city guy through all of my travels. I like to spend more time outside. And so really rushed through my master's and decided to get back to living in ways that were more appealing to me, which meant interacting with people more than ideas. So dove out of graduate school. I actually sort of took a very hard right turn, which I think a lot of people were really confused about because I was on a very successful track, and started working in outdoor education, mostly with kids, doing some guiding work, a lot more financially insecure and less like straightforward, but a really joy-making work after that. And that was a really happy stretch of my life through there when I made the decision, once again, to listen to my gut, realize what I liked, and get back to that.
Yeah. I don't usually talk about my stories on these interviews because it's so focused on the guest, but
Sure.
I couldn't help but resonate with what you just talked about. Like, hey, as soon as I got my master's, I did it. But you think about like how you just like really pushed through because you didn't listen to your gut. And then here's this like hard right turn. As soon as I got my master's, I went and I worked as a front desk at a spa because it got me a free ski pass and I did not have to do anything at all and I made like pennies, but I made enough to pay rent to like stay in this dinky little place in this little town in, Western Maine. And I loved it because it's what I needed to like hit the reset and find my joy and the direction. Anyways, but okay, so here you are now. You're guiding, financially insecure. How did we end up like now taking another like hard left or a hard right?
I mean, really, for the next, almost like 15, 17 years, spent most of my time working in that world. So was often spending summers in one part of the country, the school year working in like school-based programs with kids in outdoor ed or experiential education in another part of the country. And that was amazing because I got to know so much about the different ways people live all over our country. So I spent time living in Colorado, where I met you, Joanna, Idaho, a lot of time in Alaska, 2 different long stints in Alaska. But what was really interesting about it was with a lot of those moves and learning more, and sort of began to see communicating with people and helping them experience something that was meaningful to me and make their own meaning out of it. I began to hone this craft of communicating with people. And I think the better I got at that and the more fun I was having doing that, the more opportunities opened up for me. So I sort of stopped predicting what the next step was and started being really intentional about just saying yes to opportunities that felt right for me, and just trying to get better at the things I liked. And it opened up really cool doors. So was very much working as sort of a outdoor educator, guide, living out of my truck most of the time, and had the opportunity just through doing a really good job with Big City Mountaineers, which is where we met, to sort of take over that national program eventually and learn so much about some things that really interested me. And then from there, and getting to know people in my travels and work, got offered a job to help essentially start an outdoor education program at a college in Idaho, which was really exciting because I was still doing all the stuff I like to do, but becoming a little more secure, seeing new stuff, right? Like being able to grow up while still doing the things I loved. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm picturing almost this like convergence, right? Of like the path based on the experiences, based on like really what was driving you internally all along. And now it's just like all coming together. And it's not to say that it's this, again, I'm just going to be hokey based on this podcast. It's not like all of a sudden this convergence came in and there wasn't a divergence again at another point. But as you're just kind of describing the sequence of how this is all kind of evolved, I'm just picturing this river convergence.
I think that's a really good analogy. And I think it gains momentum, it gains volume the more you learn. And just like a river, like every time I've tried to dam it up and make it go somewhere I wanted it to go versus where I wanted to go, it eventually went back on course, right? I think.
Can we keep going with the river analogy?
Yeah, right?
This just feels like outdoor educators speak right now. Like, okay,
exactly.
You have rapids around the bend, right? Like, again, I totally goofy.
Certainly were.
All right, so now you're back in Wisconsin. Let's get to what are you doing now? Because I think that also just kind of, again, reflects back on the journey as a whole leading up to what it is you're doing.
Yeah, I think as I continued to grow professionally and saw myself losing some of the things that were benefits when I was younger, but gaining some other things that were benefits for my life now, I started to do a lot more reflection about what my values were and how my work was living out the same values I wanted to live out with my family and my friends and my community. And one of those things for me is the more I professionally grew in the realm of sort of like outdoor recreation and education, I was feeling more alienated from the values that brought me to it in the first place, which were to connect people to their own relationship with the natural world, develop an ethical or moral system around that interaction with the natural world. And it became much more focused on like teaching technical skills so people could, be badasses outdoors, which is fun. Like I like skiing, I like rock climbing, but that's not like why I wanted to teach those things. And so began to make moves towards working in more traditionally in the conservation realm. So I was living in Alaska, doing like board service work more in the conservation world, trying to get to know people in that. And it really uses all the same skills, which are communicating with people, building relationships, getting them to understand something that might be foreign or bigger than they're used to understanding. And my partner and I found out we were having a kiddo. And not long after that, a job popped up. A mentor of mine who happens to live in Wisconsin sent me a job with the Ice Age Trail Alliance, which is a national scenic trail here in Wisconsin. And it was actually the first place I ever went on a backpacking trip when I was in high school, getting exposed to it, which felt sort of serendipitous.
Yeah.
And they were hiring for a role that just kind of checked every box for what I like to do. And we ended up moving back from Alaska with a, like 4-month-old baby to rural Wisconsin. And it's been awesome. I'm learning so much, and it feels really like full circle to me to be serving this thing that kicked off what I discovered I love to do, and being able to work in a conservation space. Our organization is like a land trust, so we preserve land. We partner with public land agencies. I'm learning a lot about government relations, which I never thought would be part of my world, what is just education. And so it's been really cool to put myself in a position where I'm not as knowledgeable and I'm growing so much at each step, but doing it in a way that's fully value aligned. Yeah.
I was kind of picturing, actually, as you were just rattling that off, like it almost sounds like the unifying right now of all of these experiences and the, like, you know, personally and professionally leading up to this point. And you're also being tasked to grow in areas that you haven't had experience in. Which
is fun, right?
Yeah.
That's ultimately fun if you're excited about it, if it's something that's serving your values. Yeah.
Well, and I think that, I mean, that's one of those things too, that just like from an employment standpoint, if there's complacency or you don't feel like you're being challenged because you already know everything, then that's usually a good sign to be like, and let's see what is next, on the horizon for me, because this is not going to continue to fill me up. And I think back to your example of like, you know, as a young man, here you are like hauling, you know, shingles up onto a roof, and you're like, is this what I want to do the rest of my life? Again, no knock on anybody that does roofing, because obviously like that is a business, but it's not for everybody. So thinking through that anyways.
Yeah, okay. It did feel like the inflection point for that. And I think this is worth putting a fine point on, and something I wish I would have known when I was younger, like mastery of something or like honing a craft. If it begins to feel like you've done that, you probably haven't finished learning that. You're probably just bored of learning that thing, and it's time to challenge yourself with something new, right? And I think that was my inflection point to pursue this new concept of what career and sort of vocation could look like.
Yeah. Okay, so having heard all of this journey leading to where you are today, I have to ask the question, if you view yourself as successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. I think if I were to define success for myself, I'd ask myself if I was treating the people around me with kindness and love, like entering the world and showing care for other people is probably the greatest success. And if you do that, usually that comes back to you and things move well. I'm like able to balance what I would see as a more traditionally successful professional life, but I still like get to hang out with my kiddo and my partner a lot, and am not, spending nights till 10 p.m. at the office usually. I still get to do all of the things I love outside of work. And I feel like there will always be a little bit of me that feels like I'm not doing enough service. And the second I feel like I am, I'm probably not succeeding in my metrics. So it's good to not feel like I'm fully successful, right? Because that would make me complacent. Yeah.
There you go. All right. Well, okay. So having heard all this, and you talked about actually the agency that you work for, usually I direct anybody in the audience that wants to connect with the guest through contact points. And I do think that there's a benefit basically in the role that you're doing, right? Education, also being connected to kind of the government agencies and or like systems to really get people involved. And I also imagine too that there's some sort of like contribution component to if somebody is wanting to like donate. I could be like making assumptions. So I'm going to let you talk for a second, and then also just make sure that you're putting in there, like, how do people learn about what it is that you're doing, especially if they're local, and if they're not local, how do they still get curious and learn more?
Sure. Yeah. So my day job is, like I said, with the Ice Age Trail Alliance. We're the nonprofit partner of the Ice Age National Scenic Trail, which is a National Park Service unit. It's a really unique public-private partnership that there are very few of, like, in the country. You can learn more about it at iceagetrail.org. we are fully dependent on volunteers. So there's only 25 staff, and we have about 2,000 volunteers that build trail, take kids on hikes, go to the state and federal capitals to lobby for us, do most of the work for us. And pretty much in any other part of the country, there are public land management agencies that use nonprofit partners to do this work too. And we have some young people, like my 16-year-old nephew has come out on trail building projects with me. And it's really cool because you get exposed to people who are volunteering their free time doing these things, but also the people who have spent their careers as public servants working for projects that keep public lands accessible. And I would encourage anyone, if they have any inkling of interest in sort of recreation or conservation, to get out and to see the various possibilities that are out there by giving a little bit of time towards a project like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is the best call to action as a kind of wrap up to this interview, really is just that. If you're not local to the area, like still look it up, get connected, or also like look at what's in your backyard and get connected. Because we live in a world right now where we are really disconnected from our space. And like, it's so important for not just young people, but like all people to get out.
Absolutely. And I think, this is a sort of passion point of mine, but even as I was sort of like a young punk rocker kid, grew up in the city, like to skateboard and listen to loud music, and was lucky enough to have some much older folks who took me under their wing and taught me things like rock climbing or how to learn about recreating on public lands, and was lucky to be open to those, even as a rather like rebellious young person. And I think on both ends of the spectrum, the sort of intergenerational interactions that people have when they choose to give their time as opposed to have a transaction around it can create these really life-changing experiences for people who are at any point in their life. And there's so few opportunities for those intergenerational interactions in our current culture. And so want to give a plug for anything that creates those.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Bix, thank you again for carving out time to be a guest on the podcast.
Thank you, Joanna. Good to see you.
Oh my gosh, it's been too long. Congratulations on the kid, on the move, on the journey through life. And for anybody that is listening to this, please do connect with Bix, figure it out, and then see what's in your backyard.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email joanna@lilleyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lilleyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.